This is the defining moment of what it means to be human. Are we going to blow ourselves up because we couldn't decide how to share? Banks either adapt or they die. We all believe that the government is supposed to save us. Therefore, the government says, okay, great, we don't want to raise taxes because that's very unpopular, regardless of whether democratic or not. If you own a house, you want what Trump wants to have happen, right? He's going to pump your house price too.
I worry very much about society tearing itself apart.
To say that he is against socialism just doesn't, don't remember what happened in 2020. The United States is not going anywhere just because debt to GDP is 135 or 140%. There's an immense capacity to add more debt in the US situation. If you don't like the way the situation is in the United States, there's a whole big old world out there. Leave.
The economy right now feels pretty brittle to me. Crypto has dipped hard. Stocks are whipsawing. AI looks like the biggest bubble ever. What is the real force underneath all of this? And is the economy about to break?
I know most of the listeners here are from the United States, and I think that there's been a lot of discussion of the K-shaped economy. There's a very small percent of people who are doing very, very well. And then the majority of Americans, if you take a look at some of the consumer sentiment surveys, think this is the worst economy since the 70s, even worse than the global financial crisis, when it looked like the world was going to implode on itself because of over-leveraged American subprime mortgages. And the question is why is that if, GDP, supposedly real GDP is growing at 3% a year, supposedly people are making more money and all these sorts of things. And I think the name of the game is inflation. People really feel inflation. And I know that the authorities in the United States and around the world like to say, oh, the year-on-year change is either the decelerating or it's in deflation. But, everyday people don't give a fuck about the rate of change. They care about the actual price level. So how much does stuff cost right now? How much did it used to cost? Did my salary keep up with that? How do I feel about this situation? And obviously, the answer is that majority of people in the United States and around the world are like, I'm getting inflated away. I afford less than I used to. I need to buy all these things just to have a job, whether it's a cell phone or it's a car or it's a type of dwelling that I live in or it's childcare or all those sorts of things. And, I look on social media and I see all the influencers are partying like it's 1999, but I'm broke as fuck and I'm working, 1-2 jobs and I'm barely treading water. And so I think that's why a lot of Americans and a lot of people around the world feel this sort of apathy and disillusionment with this supposedly amazing world economy that we have right now.
Okay, so walk me through, how did we get here? What is the driving factor? There's a lot of different theses about what exactly put us in this position. I certainly have one. My audience will be very familiar with my take. But walk me through what's driving all this.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about money printing. Every single economy in the world is essentially a fractional reserve banking system with this sort of Keynesian economic bent, meaning the government's supposed to spend money to incite demand. And if there's ever a situation where there's too much credit or too much over leverage, then the government comes in and saves those who are the bad actors in the economy, prints a bunch of money, and then the party continues. And if we keep doing that over and over and over again, over time, inflation builds up. And what an average person used to be able to afford on an average salary, they no longer can. And, pick your country, the average first-time home buyer is much older than they used to be. Household formation is down. People are having less kids. It's all the same, symptom of the same thing. We all believe that the government is supposed to save us. Therefore, the government says, okay, great, we don't want to raise taxes because that's very unpopular, regardless of whether democratic or not, in terms of how people express their opinion politically. We're just going to print a bunch of money. And if you don't own financial assets, then you're screwed, essentially. And that compounds. If you've been doing this since, the end of World War II, 80 years ago, we get to this situation today where, the average home buyer in the US is 40 years old? The first time home buyer, something in that, where it used to be, the mid-20s in, the 60s and 70s, at least in the United States context, is literally just a symptom of printed money.
This is something that I don't think people really take on board in terms of going back to what you were talking about with the K-shaped economy. That's what really got me thinking about all of this. I wouldn't have been able to put words to it, but it just felt like there were two separate economies now that I do know how to articulate this. And you've got one, the people that understand that if you have an inflating currency that where I'm able to buy less every day, and there is a way for me to escape it, then savvy people are going to go wherever that escape hatch is. And that means getting into something that is protected against inflation. So assets, to oversimplify. And right now, the stat that really drives me crazy is that 10% of Americans own 93% of the assets. And so when you get a moment like this where so much liquidity is sloshing around because the government, or the Fed, I should say, to be more specific, is just not raising rates, how do you think we have to factor fiscal dominance in this to really understand what's going on?
Well, I think the underlying problem is that it's not all the government's fault, is that nobody wants to take the hard medicine. In the 1930s, and whether or not you think this was the correct thing, for a little bit of time after the Great Depression, which was a credit-fueled boom, the thinking was, okay, let's let the amount of credit contract. People lost their jobs, businesses went under, the keys were handed to the creditors at banks and different industrial companies, and the medicine was there, and the U.S. and global economy contracted a lot, and it was a Great Depression. But again, there was the hangover from the 20s and the early 20th century when there was all this sort of money printing and activity. That sort of situation, obviously, Herbert Hoover was a one-term president because of that.
Meaning because he was being fiscally responsible and not just continuing the party, they booted him out of office.
This is one of the reasons. But again, at the end of the day, it's very unpopular. And so I don't care whether it's in the United States or you're talking about China, which is a different type of political system. Nobody wants to be the politician that stands up and says, okay, whether or not this was your fault, maybe you're only 18 years old, and this is a result of decades of fiscal irresponsibility. We're going to stop it right now. No more credit. If your business doesn't have enough cash flow to pay its debts, too bad, you go out of business, you fire your workers, we're going to contract the economy, get back to a healthier level, and then rebuild. And unemployment is 20, 30%, whatever, some ridiculously high number. That is not winning you an election. Or that is not going to keep the average person supporting you as an autocratic leader. So you see, okay, what's the path of least resistance? It's, hey, I hear you, things are expensive, here's a check. Don't worry about how it's funded. You don't have to pay any more taxes. We're just going to hand out money and, for your bills here, your healthcare there. And then it just makes the situation even worse because nobody's willing to stand up and say, okay, today is the day, it's over. And unfortunately, you are where you are. And some of you are going to be losers. Some of you are going to be winners. But over time, this is going to be the best way forward for our particular country. That just is not a winning political strategy. I don't care what type of democratic or autocratic government you have. And therefore, we get what we have today.
The way that I think about this is a parent whose 14-year-old wakes up with a severe hangover, and the parent is reaching up into the cupboard to get the medicine and is like, listen, you brought this on yourself, cracks open a bottle of vodka, starts pouring it into some orange juice, and is like, but I feel you. I get it. So here, drink this and you're going to feel so much better. And because people do not understand how the economy works, they drink it down. And it does sort of push off having to deal with the hangover, but it is going to come for you. Like eventually you either become an alcoholic and you die of cirrhosis of the liver, or you eventually get sober and you have to deal with it. When I look at the economy right now, I really try not to be an alarmist. I understand it well enough. I'm going to be okay. But I really don't like the sense that a lot of crypto people have where it's like, well, I know how to escape this in an uninflatable currency. I've got a life raft. It's available to all you guys if you want it, but they will never because they don't understand it. And so I have this pull to really want people to understand the mechanism by which this works. And I want them to understand how fragile the economy is, all because of that very simple statement that you made about debt and money printing. And the fact that nobody, regardless of Democrat, Republican, dictator, democratically elected, no one says austerity, everyone says print money. Do you think that I've taken one too many black pills, or do you think that I am seeing it correctly, but I should just stop worrying about it and learn to love the bomb? Or what do you take away from all that?
So, I mean, I think you contextualize it well, but there are ways out of it. And I think the AI dream for a politician is one of the only ways out, which is we're going to create so much productivity and abundance that this debt doesn't really matter. We've taken all this debt, a lot of it was wasted, but we created these AI companies, and then they created this magical thing called AI and humanoid robotics, and all of a sudden the cost of labor is essentially zero, and the cost of intelligence is essentially zero. So but I don't think they've realized the problem that brings for a fractional reserve debt-based society that we have, which is when the average investment banker and lawyer and accountant, the most vulnerable people to AI are those who make the most money today, who have the most sort of like debt, right? They have a house, they have a car, and have a rolling credit card bill to afford the nice stuff that they're supposed to have. The TikTok tells them that they need. When you fire those people first, because that's the easiest thing to replace in the first iteration of AI, and they can't pay their bills. And what happens to the entire when the 9% of the 10% who won't know everything can't pay their bills because they lost their job, because you don't need investment bankers and lawyers and accountants when an AI can do it for free, essentially. Well, then what happens to the system then? What happens when you have, 5 companies, you spent all this money, you created the God AI, they have all this power, they've created all this abundance. Are they going to share it with everybody else? They don't need any other workers anymore. What happens to everyone else? Is it just going to be, Mark Zuckerberg and Elon and Bezos and Altman sitting in the club, and everybody else is starving because they said, well, capitalism and property rights says that I created this, I invested, fuck you, I took your data and I made it, but you didn't invest in my company, so you don't get to experience this abundance post-scarcity world where we've eliminated the national debt because it doesn't matter anymore because we have robots and AI. I think that's what the conversation people should be thinking about in their head. The whole debt-based financialized economy, I think that's a post-World War II, the last 80 years. That's the last war. People are fighting that. What they should be thinking about is how do we reform society to share what is going to be created by these either supranational, tech giants, this AI and robotics, this abundance that was based on our human data to create this. We're not getting compensated for that as society. How do we share that? That's a conversation that people need to have right now, rather than, well, what are we going to do about the national debt? And I think if people start having that conversation and thinking about how they're going to reform political systems to deal with that, that is the next big risk. It's not whether or not the US or Japan or China or Europe can afford the debt. They can print the money. There's various ways to reduce your debt to GDP. It requires lots of high inflation. But I think that the real risk that people are not talking about is what happens when we don't need everybody or 20 or 30% of people anymore, especially the 20 or 30% of people who made the most money in the previous system. What happens when they're irrelevant?
We'll get back to the show in just a moment, but first, let's talk about the most expensive mistake crypto traders are making right now. 70% of US crypto traders think tax obligations only apply to centralized exchanges. If that's you, you are wrong, unfortunately. Most people do not realize every crypto-to-crypto trade is taxable. And for the first time ever, exchanges are now required to report your digital asset sales directly to the IRS. If your records don't match theirs, you've got a problem. Some, formerly Crypto Tax Calculator, was built specifically to solve this problem. It supports TurboTax along with over 3,500 exchange, wallet, and crypto integrations. It handles DeFi, NFTs, staking, and airdrops with full support for US-specific tax rules. and it strips out spam tokens so junk doesn't corrupt your actual gains and losses. Sum generates IRS-ready reports that maximize your deductions and minimize what you owe. If you're ready to turn crypto chaos into confidence, click the link in the show notes and use code TOMVIP20 for 20% off your first year at Sum. Now, let's get back to the show. Even if AI does everything that we think it will do, which on a long enough timeline, I think it will blow past all of our expectations. The problem is that when you drive energy and labor to zero, you, as you pointed out, you start obliterating a lot of jobs, and that isn't going to be instantaneous. That's going to happen over time. You're going to have a meaning and purpose crisis, and you're going to have a bunch of people that will expect a government handout, like in the short term. I don't know. There'll be something where first the wealth is going to accumulate to the owners, then we'll deploy all the things, because I don't think there's any reason for the bots and all of the energy to accumulate to the top. It's not sustainable. They will literally be murdered. So the people that try to hoard that, there'll just be way too many people struggling. So their first act of self-preservation will either be to create a military, which I just really doubt, or to start deploying some of the abundance out to other people. But it's the transitionary phase where it will exacerbate both financial hardship and psychological hardship, which will lead to deeper fractures in society. America is just extremely prone to this. Europe is like a powder keg right now. So any sort of downward pressure, and you're going to get this, I think, very explosive response. So it's like, even if you believe that AI is going to do all the things, AI doing the things is a problem unto itself. So that's where I'm like, okay, you're going to take a system that is economically fragile and you're going to make it psychologically fragile. And if you think that it's going to be hard to get people to migrate into an asset class that would save them from this, I think it's 10 times harder to get them to, or austerity, it's going to be 10 times harder to get them to understand that we have to completely reimagine nation states and what an economy looks like in a post-scarcity world. Like, that is 10x more daunting to me.
But I think that's going to come faster than we think. It's going to come faster than the debt doom loop that I'm sure that a lot of people will talk about. Oh, we're adding $1 trillion of this and that. Okay, cool. But what happens if we fire 10% of all of the most highly paid workers in the next 2 to 3 years? Because, you know, Anthropic can now do the job of a junior investment banker who was making $150,000 a year for $10 a month. I don't need an entire class of JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs and Bank of America analysts anymore. I don't need junior lawyers. I have an entire corpus of precedent, all in machine readable format. Do I need an associate at a law firm anymore? Do I need a CPA? It's just codified rules. They can follow the perfectly. So all the jobs that people were telling their kids, oh, go to university, spend, get yourself in $250,000 of debt to get this degree, to do this professional career, that's over. We don't need those people anymore. Why am I paying you $2,000 an hour? And I think that's going to happen faster than people think. And this conversation about what is society? What does it mean to be a productive human? This is something that people have to think about, because there's going to be political leaders who are going to emerge to preach their own version of this, whatever that may be. Some of it will be very militant, like fuck the computers, I'm about humanity first. We're going to go back to the way things were when everybody had a job and everybody had purpose and all those sort of things. Get rid of all this AI. There are going to be those that, oh no, AI can solve everything. Just hold on a minute, we got this. And so I think that's going to be the contentious debate, and it's going to happen way sooner than we talk about whether or not the United States or China or Japan can afford to pay the interest on their debt.
Okay, so your bet is that happens so much faster. So let's say that my timeline is roughly correct, that it's 10 years before we buckle under the weight of the debt. You're saying 2 to 3 years, maybe a little bit more, and we have to contend with massive economic disruption from AI.
Yeah, and it only takes about 10%, right? If you could eliminate 10% of the highest paying white collar jobs, which are very formulaic, and easily replace with a very intelligent LLM, well, these are the most politically active people. What are they going to decide to do with society? Is the rest of the society that, still has a job because they flip burgers, to be a bit trite, and the robot can't do that yet, so they actually have a purpose, versus the investment banker who went to, XYZ Ivy League school making $150,000 out of school. We don't need them. We don't need him and her anymore. We do need the construction worker, the nurse, the policeman. We need those people still, but they weren't that politically important in the old system. And now these people have been disenfranchised. What are they going to decide to do with society? And is the rest of society going to support them and what they believe that this post-scarcity or just 10% more efficient society looks like without the wealthiest folks?
All right, let's extrapolate an answer to that from where we are today. So there are certain things that we know in terms of how people respond. The way that people are responding to "I can't make ends meet" is hyper gambling. So they are not being fiscally responsible. They're not buckling down and saving. They're going on every gambling mechanism that they can find, from poly markets, sports betting, Pokemon cards. I mean, just literally crypto, shit coins, Bitcoin, Ethereum, like all of it is, in my opinion, and again, I am happy to fight about this stuff, but I think the only way to intelligently understand the markets is to think of them as gambling. Once you understand that humans step to them as gambling mechanisms by and large. I'm not saying that sophisticated value investors are doing that, although yes, I am saying that. I will concede that point isn't going to be the part that I'll like fight people on, because that gets a bit semantical. But just in general, I think it is undeniable that that's what people are doing. So we know that people are going to go into a gambling scenario. We know that right now, overeducated people that are underemployed are leaning towards, let's call it socialism. The left-leaning variant tends to be more popular among hyper-educated, underemployed people. And so you put those two things together and it's like, okay, you're going to get some ungodly number of people that are like, all right, well, my only shot then is to gamble. And then you're going to get some ungodly number of people that are like, not only am I going to gamble, but I want the government to give me the money with which I'm going to gamble. What say you to that? Do you think that is what we see in the tea leaves, or do you see something different?
Yeah, I think there's some variant of that. And it's, hey, the Mamdanis of the world, all these things that we know, socialism is not a new concept. It's a very old concept. There was this dislocation. We have this thing called the money printer. Instead of dealing with the hard conversation with society of what it is to be a productive human, how do we share this abundance that we've created with this new intelligence? We're going to just print a bunch of money to paper over the problem because we don't want to deal with it, because it's too hard to have this conversation. And yes, you get the hyper gambling mentality, which is, I've got a little bit of money. However, maybe my parents gave me a little stipend. I'm getting a government check, universal basic income, whatever it is. I'm going to the stock market. I'm going to meme coins. I'm going to crypto and what have you. And yes, S&P might be at 20,000 and Bitcoin's at 1 million. And it's all the same sort of theme. We don't want to deal with the problem. So we're going to print a bunch of money to mollify people until shit gets so bad, whether it's, a bunch of young people in the streets protesting, violence, whatever it is, until we're going to have this cataclysmic conversation about what it means to be a productive human.
Why was Margaret Thatcher able to pull this off? Like, what are we missing right now, or structurally, what is different? Because in the 80s, Margaret Thatcher was able to say to England, all right, like, we got to tighten the belt. We got to do less. Otherwise, we're not going to make it. Or I don't know. She had some sort of convincing message.
China was the deflationary impact that allowed the West to sort of deleverage themselves and do these neoliberal policies, whatever you want to call it, and not suffer inflation. China shipped you the everyday low prices at Walmart and gave you all these great things super cheap because you essentially added, let's call it 500 million people, very productive youngsters, to the global economy to make stuff super cheap. China was willing to degrade their economy beyond anywhere beyond, produce the solar panels, produce the rare earths. They don't produce energy, but all these things that they degraded their local environment so that the West could enjoy the 80s to the early 2010s. That was all predicated on the Chinese entering the workforce. Unfortunately, policymakers don't like to acknowledge that that's really the reason why they're able to pursue these policies and not blow up their economies.
All right, so there's no new China
again, right? We don't have another 500 million young people or another country willing to degrade its environment to the extent that China did for the first part of its, grow up phase in the 80s and 90s. Right now, we have a different sort of problem and a different sort of situation.
It's interesting. What do you think India entering the market is going to look like? Are they already so plugged in we're never going to feel anything from them? Are they going to be felt in a unique way?
Well, I think right now it's a story of robots, right? Even if India plugs in, if you think about, I'm a manufacturer of something, I'm a big shareholder in a textile company, and you cannot beat how efficient China is at producing things. Just cannot. There is no other country that has the infrastructure available, the amount of labor, and the installed robotics base that China has. And so I don't care if you have India, you have Vietnam, Malaysia, Mexico, all these other places which are essentially low-cost manufacturing centers do not have the ability to have the infrastructure of China. And so this isn't a story about adding a bunch of low-cost workers. It's how many robots per 100,000 people do you have or installed? What percentage of your factory is mechanized? Because, okay, sure, India can add a few 100 million young people to the labor force, but China has built a million robots. Same with Japan. These robots are infinitely cheaper than a human, regardless of where they're at. And so I think that story of, okay, we're just going to repeat what China did in the 80s and 90s with India, with Nigeria, with Indonesia, all these growing young populations, is just not happening because we have robots and we have AI, we have these advancements. Human labor is going to be obsolete, and a lot of these things that we did in the past.
Ooh, okay. Well, then let us face AI head on. So we've obviously already talked about a huge part of the puzzle, but we haven't talked about the economic part of the puzzle. What happens when AI is a better investor than anybody else? And so you and I are like, we understand this stuff, bro. We're going to keep being rich all day. And then we get an AI that comes in that is loaded up with crypto and it just goes and does its thing. What does AI's impact into the competitive nature of the financial markets look like?
I don't believe that AI is any better or worse than a human investor. I mean, think about it today, right?
Like today, sure, but in 5 years?
Well, what is the market? The market is essentially a discounting tool for human preferences and scarcity, right? And so if we remove, so an AI is an AI going to be better at predicting human preferences than a human?
Yes.
I don't know. But if you are, this is already the case. If you're an investor and you're like, I'm going to be a day trader, right? And I'm going to go up against, Citadel and Jump and DRW and all these massive, Goldman Sachs and all these trading firms that essentially use very intelligent computers to do all of their trading, you're already losing money. So it's not like this is a new situation. If you think that you're going to day trade yourself into, being the best, being Warren Buffett, I'm sorry, but there is a computer out there that is better than you, faster than you, smarter than you. Mm-hmm. What you have to do as an investor is say, okay, I believe in a future where this particular product or service gains traction, and therefore I'm going to buy and hold this stock, this crypto, this whatever, and over time I'm going to make money. But to be a systematic short-term trader hasn't been profitable for a retail investor in a very long time, and it won't be profitable when AI is there either. So I'm not exactly worried about that particular outcome. I just think that's just not a style of investing that is suited for a lot of individual humans. Like,
let me see if I can make you scared. So we just talked about that one of the things that we see right now today is when people are not able to have their income keep up with the cost of living, they go to hyper gambling. You give them stimmy checks, they hyper gamble the stimmy checks. So now you are correct They would be unwise to go into the markets and hyper gamble, especially given that AI is already better than them at that. 5 years from now, AI is going to be really better. And by the way, the AI is going to understand how people respond to algorithms, how to sway algorithms. And so the AI is going to put out messaging that humans will respond to. The AI is going to understand what I certainly understand, which is that markets are effectively entirely sentiment driven. And so now AI manipulates sentiment. Humans hyper gamble against that sentiment. AI laughs all the way to winning at all the PvP stuff. Now, anybody who understands better will back off and go, listen, I play a long-term game. I'm not going to be able to beat the AI, so I don't even try. But my whole thing is there is a generation, and I don't know if that generation is 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, probably not much more than 10 years. But there's going to be a 10-year span where we go from energy cost is racing towards zero, labor cost is racing towards zero, and everybody settles into the age of abundance. And in that period, oh dear God, AI is just going to hand people its ass. In the same way it beats us at chess, in the same way it beats us at Go, it will beat us at the game of short-term investing. It will just crush the average investor. Humans can already crush the average investor. And so you have this tiny number of people.
It doesn't change anything. It's okay. Instead of Ken Griffin making $16 billion a year, it's some AI model. Do we care? Not really.
Yeah, but Ken Griffin becomes the moron that's getting his ass handed to him. So,
well, not really. I mean, it's just like who's going to extract this VIG from the desperate retail? The desperate retail is there. No, that's what we should change rather than saying, well, the AI is going to beat you at stock investing. Well, Citadel was already beating you at stock investing, and Robinhood and Payment for order flow and all these MicroStrategy things were already fucking you. It wasn't like the AI is going to change the situation. You still were going to lose all your money in 5 seconds if you went 100x long, right? It doesn't matter whether there was an AI on the other side or, pick your large institutional investor. That was already happening. So we're just changing who makes the money, potentially. It doesn't matter. What matters is just don't play that game. You already were losing it today when there was a little bit of AI. You were losing it yesterday and there was no AI. Understand that and just don't do that. I think that's got to be the message rather than, let's freak out about the AI. It's going to be better at stock picking. It's going to be better at being Citadel. But the money is still going to just go to that particular bucket.
We'll get back to the show in just a second. But first, let's address the uncomfortable truth about business ideas. Ideas are worthless unless you actually know how to execute. If you're ready to make 2026 the year you stop being most people and actually start your business, then Shopify is here to help. Shopify gives you everything you need to execute well and sell online and in person. Choose from hundreds of beautiful templates you can customize to match your brand. Their built-in AI tools write product descriptions and headlines and help you edit product photos instantly. Marketing is built in as well. Create email and social campaigns that reach customers wherever they scroll. As you grow, Shopify is going to grow with you. This is your shot. Entrepreneurship has never been more important or available. So sign up right now for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/impact. Hear your first sale this new year with Shopify by your side. All right, let's get back to the show. Let's talk leverage. So one, will AI influence the rate at which leverage is available? I don't know if there'll be any impact there, but I've heard you talk about AI's interaction with leverage before. So I'd love to know that. And then I would love to dovetail into the fact that Maelstrom, your company, does not use leverage, which I think is super brilliant. And so I'd love to get your take on those two aspects of leverage.
Well, leverage will become more and more available as sort of the types of financial products proliferate that, especially the thing that I invented with BitMEX called a perpetual swap. It's a highly leveraged derivative that we invented in the crypto space. That's coming to equities. It's already started on some decentralized platforms, and it's going to become ubiquitous. Instead of trading a futures contract or an options contract that, we're familiar with, it's going to be a perpetual swap on equities, on bonds, on crypto, and that is going to be very highly leveraged and gamified. What people need to understand is, and I tell these people, there's nothing wrong with leverage. The problem is that people are not dedicated professional traders. And when I say professional, I don't mean that you went to a fancy school and you got a degree that made you a professional trader. I mean that this is your job. You live and breathe the market that you trade. You're on your phone all the time. You've got alerts. You go to bed, something happens in your market, you wake up and you deal with it. That is a very small sliver of traders. And if you dedicate yourself to this craft, you can become successful. What people don't want to do is they want to become successful without dedicating themselves to the craft. And so they want to work their job, do their passion, whatever it is, go on their phone for a few hours a day, trade, use a leverage, make enough money to survive, and then that's it. And that's just not how it works, right? It's not, the market doesn't provide you profit just because you got off of work at 6 o'clock, you've got dinner at 8, so you got 2 hours to make your money. That's just not how markets work. Markets work however they want to work, and they'll provide the profit whenever they want to provide the profit. And you need to be there studiously looking at things to be ready to accept it. And so I think people don't understand that. They don't want to put in the 24/7, 365 mentality of trading. They want to trade 2 hours a day and make money. Therefore, they jack up the leverage. They approach it like they went to the casino. And what do you know? They get liquidated all the time, when you should never, ever get liquidated as a trader if you use leverage correctly. And so my advice is, unless you are willing to dedicate yourself to being a professional trader, that this is your job, then don't use leverage. Long only. Pick things you understand, whether that's crypto or stocks or real estate or FX, whatever it is. Pick something you understand, go long, and you don't have to worry about these sort of things. And over time, if you are studious and you buy things that you understand, you should do okay.
All right,
again, that's not a sexy way to think about things.
It is sexy for anybody that wants a long-term relationship. So for me, from a, this is sort of the Squares equivalent of dating advice. Instead of trying to bag chicks, it's, I want to fall in love and I want to get married and I want to, have something that is prolonged and has meaning and purpose and all that good stuff. So I'm right with you. That is the eternal advice that I will give people. Now, for somebody that wants to do the fast and furious dry humping of the leveraged trade, how do you do that well? So you gave us you've got to be 24/7, totally understood. Is there, because there was a recent event where somebody got liquidated, like just some ungodly, like 6,000 Bitcoin or some terrifying number. What did they do wrong that we can all learn from?
So, position sizing is the number one thing. Like, how big is your position relative to the underlying liquidity? There's a big risk off event in crypto on October 10th. Started at Binance and spread to a bunch of other exchanges. And essentially what a lot of traders didn't understand the product that they were trading. They didn't read the information that was given by the exchanges about how these things worked. Something happened to the microstructure of the market, adversely affected their positions. They didn't know what to do because they had never thought about it before. But it was all written down, been there for years. And so, again, study your craft. Are you a professional trader? Yes. Okay, well then you better know every single way that your exchange operates, right? People in the stock market found out during the GameStop crisis what settlement meant. What did DTC mean? How do these things interact with the exchange and the broker and your trading app? Why were you locked out of the stock? Why weren't you allowed to trade? You didn't know the rules. So if you want to play the game, know the rules. Study the rules, understand the rules. If you don't understand the rules, ask customer support. They want your money. They want you to spend time and effort on this app. If you don't understand something, ask them, and they're going to explain it to you because they want you to trade and pay them fees. But if you don't ask questions and you get ignorant and you think, oh, everything's going to be okay, then, over leverage things happen. Certain policies that the exchange has you didn't read about kick into effect, and all of a sudden you find yourself liquidated. You don't know why, because you didn't read, because you didn't dedicate yourself to what you're supposed to do as a trader. You should never, ever be liquidated as a trader. That just means you didn't understand what it is you're trading and you didn't size your position correctly.
What are the things that people don't understand? How fast the market moves or how much collateral they need? What's like the common mistake?
So specifically this last incident in the crypto space, or this thing called automatic deleveraging, where because there was more losses than profits, some of the traders who had profit had to get their positions closed early. And some traders run these long short strategies where they're losing money on one side, making money on the other. Well, what happens when the side that you're supposed to make back up, more than you lost gets closed out early? You don't make all that profit. All of a sudden now you have a loss. And people thought, well, what is this thing? Well, it's been written about I've almost invented it 10 years ago. And people didn't read the stuff when I wrote it then. They don't read it now. And CZ and the other crypto guys write about it on their own platform. So again, it's you're trading a leveraged product. There are ways in which that leverage is created. Understand how that leverage is created. Understand the math. Understand how the exchange polices that leverage and how it protects itself with its margining system, how the clearinghouse works. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of you are like, whoa, this is a lot of information that I don't know. And I'm using these leveraged products. I don't know if I want to expend this sort of time and effort to really go deep on this. Well, then don't use leverage. Just buy and hold. It's just that simple.
Okay, so punchline being that leverage is basically for the professional trader. You've already
professional
been
being on effort, not on knowledge. Effort.
Right,
it's all about effort.
Very fair point. So given the moment that we're in, given that you've got 10% of people that own 93% of all the assets, how can somebody today that doesn't want to trade on leverage, how do they get into the market and not feel pre-defeated by the fact that they don't have a lot of money to spend? And now if you're telling them leverage isn't for you, what's the play?
Time and compounding interest rates. So I was having a conversation with a friend, and he happens to be a lucky soul that has access to a rent-controlled apartment in New York City. And he was saying that rent's gone up, I think, since the 70s, 3 or 4 times, whatever it is. So if you break that down and look at the compound annual growth rate, it's about 2 to 3%, right? So a 2 to 3% compounding on a dollar gets you 3 to 4 times more money over time in an exponentially increasing fashion. So I think people need to understand very basic, the compound interest rate and time works in your favor if you're patient. If you're not patient, then those things work against you. And so, yes, in the beginning, it might look like, the hockey stick isn't going anywhere, but then you hit an inflection point and then you go like that. And that's the whole point, is to be able to survive long enough to get to the inflection point. Invest responsibly, invest in things that compound over time, even at a small rate. Even 2% compounding inflation has taken the value of the dollar down 99% since 1913 when the Fed was created, right? So compound interest rate and time are your friends if you use it that way, and they work against you if you use, aggressive amounts of leverage and you're impatient. And so I know it's not the most sexiest message, but patience, time, and interest will get you to where you want to be.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the sexy. I'm worried about the effective. I really do consider myself a evangelist for trying to help the average person, like the people that already understand the market. There's plenty of people for them to listen to. I'm trying to speak up for the person that never wanted to understand this, never thought they would need to understand this, and they're just not able to get ahead. They can't afford a house, like all of that stuff. So yeah, I want whatever is
also
true.
The other thing that people, instead of having the market do this for you, get politically active. Why are you supporting the same politicians, Democrat, Republican, pick your political flavor, and depending on which domicile you're in, who continue to fuck you with inflation? Stop supporting them just because this guy or girl has the right last name, went to the right school, wears the right clothes. Oh, I need to support that person. They're fucking you. Change it up. And so, yes, you can say the market needs to save me because I'm unwilling to ditch all these politicians, regardless of the party, who over many decades have continued to fuck me, but I need to go leverage the market instead of, using this thing, my voice, my political activism. We have these things called the internet and social media. People can line up for hours outside a Louis Vuitton store. Why can't you get politically active and boot out all these guys and gals who are continuously fucking you?
Yeah, you're not wrong. And I have said something along those lines myself, but I do feel a little bit hopeless when I talk about that, because the very nature of a politician is to gain and retain power. And you have been very eloquent on the hard truth, which is that you don't get elected by promising austerity. You get elected by promising free shit. And free shit is exactly how you end up in the position that we're in now. So that one, maybe of all the options, feels the most hopeless to me, because I don't think that anyone will ever get elected that is sincere about austerity. So Trump broke my heart when I realized, he was never going to balance the budget. And when he put forward the big, beautiful bill, I realized, it's game over. Like, this is just a question of degree. So maybe the Republicans spend a little bit less than the Democrats, but fiscally, they're both wildly irresponsible. So when you look at the next 3 years with Trump in power, what do you see? Is it just money printing as far as the eye can see? Is he going to be more like, is he going to be more effective at generating growth than the next person? What do you see?
So, I mean, technically speaking, you can generate growth to reduce the debt to GDP and balance the government's balance sheet by going to, a hyper growth scenario, but it's inflationary, right? And so again, you need to have the right kind of job. Maybe it's a union job or whatever, where you're able to negotiate high pay rises, or you need to be in financial assets in that situation, like in the COVID era, right? You had a lot of these unions that have been dormant for many years being able to negotiate 30, 40, 50% pay rises for the workers during COVID because everybody needed them at that period of time and they had the power. And if you take a look at the years from 2020 to 2022, the U.S. debt to GDP actually declined because they ran this hot economy model. Again, to produce a lot of inflation, which pissed a lot of people off. But that is the way in which the textbook way, and Trump invests in of sort of try to say this, that this is what they want to do, that you can deleverage the government's balance sheet, which as politicians who work for the government, that's their number one job, is deleveraging their own balance sheet. And, sorry for the inflation that we generate. I hope you have a good job and you bought some financial assets. That's what they're going to try to do. And obviously you have the Mamdanis of the world on the left who are like, hey, I can produce better free shit rhetoric than you, Trump, and therefore I am going to, win the mayoral election in New York and state elections and, Virginia and New Jersey and all those sorts of things. So Trump is a not ideological politician. He wants to win. He is the most profligate president since probably, ever. He lost his stimulus checks. He was the first president to hand out money directly to every, household, like 200 million households. No other president has done that before, like Trump has done it. So to say that he is against socialism just don't remember what happened in 2020. So he's going to do something similar again because it's very popular. And then the question is, okay, well, if you get a stimulus check or whatever it is, whether it's your house price goes up or there's a check by the government, how are you going to make sure that you leverage that money in the most effective way if you're not going to advocate for change, fundamental change in the political system? And then that is, okay, well, it's Bitcoin, it's a house, it's S&P 500, it's whatever it is you feel, it's gold, right? It's these sorts of things that you feel comfortable with. But Trump on one side, Mamdani on the other, they're kind of saying the same thing. They have different styles in which they say it. Whether or not you support them or not is not the point. They're both kind of saying the same thing. And I think once people realize that, then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to get this money from the government instead of going out and buying a new washing machine or, going to Vegas or going on vacation. How do I make sure that I parlay that into, above trend growth in my financial assets?
All right. If we know that the government is going to print, if we know that Trump is doing everything he can to drive interest rates lower, and we know that both of those things are inflationary, they will drive up asset prices, they will make houses more expensive, they'll make rent more expensive, on and on and on. What does the world look like over the next 3 years as that easy money continues to flood the system?
I mean, S&P 10,000, NASDAQ 100,000, Bitcoin 1 million, gold 15,000, right? Pick your asset, they're all going up. Maybe some go up more than the others, but that is the state of play. And so then the question is, how do you take whatever savings that you have and buy one of those things, whatever it is you feel comfortable buying? Because those are the things that have to go up as a release valve for let's run the economy hot, let's allow wage inflation, let's reduce the debt to GDP on the government's balance sheet.
Okay, so you've talked about how Trump would effectively take over the Fed. How does he do that? Because right now, obviously, he's not able to get the things done that he wants to get done. So how would he pull that coup off? And in a magical world where you have a wand and you can either help him or stop him, would you help him get control of the Fed? Is what he wants what you want to see happen, or would you stop him?
So I've answered the last question first. I'm a financial asset holder, so I want what he wants. I want cheap money. I don't want it to be plentiful, right? I own the things that are going to go up because this works, right? So, and that's just the truth of it. If you own a house, you want what Trump wants to have happen, right? He's going to pump your house price too. Now, the situation is how does he gain control of the Fed? So first of all, every single U.S. president since the Fed has been created always gets the monetary policy that they want. This is not a new phenomenon where the president and the chairman of the Fed are butting heads. This is not new. And always the Fed chairman, whoever that is, caves, or the Fed as a political body. There's a great essay written by Arthur Burns in 1979, The Anguish of Central Banking, where he essentially says that because the politicians want to provide this free money to do stuff for the people, because the people have elected them to do this, we as a Fed, whether we like it or not, are there to facilitate that. And the thing that will let go is the value of the currency and sort of responsibility of what is the value of the dollar. And we will always do that. It's essentially the message that he said. This is the 1979. So people need to do a little bit of history in terms of understanding that Trump, Biden, Clinton, Obama, Bush, Reagan, they all got the monetary policy that they wanted in the end. And so Trump will get it. I wrote an essay called 4-7, and I talked about the bureaucratic machinations on how Fed votes and how you get control of this board versus that board. Maybe he does something like that. Maybe, everyone in the Fed is convicted of mortgage fraud and you replace it all. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. All I know is that there's never been a president who's never gotten the monetary policy that they desire. Trump will get his monetary policy. How long it takes? I think sometime in the second half of 2026, he'll get the monetary policy that he wants, however he does it.
All right. You painted a picture, or maybe I painted it and you agreed, of what's going to happen when Trump gets the economy that he wants, or the Fed to do what he wants. And that's asset prices go up. But right now, asset prices are down. So what's going on with Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other assets that we see struggling right now? What's the underlying cause?
The underlying cause is the Fed is not printing as much money as we thought they would print as fast. And the technical thing is the government shutdown. So the debt ceiling fight ended in July 4th. And the U.S. Treasury essentially had to pull $1 trillion out of the economy to rebuild its checking account. And that's essentially, in a very simplistic manner, why Bitcoin all of a sudden caught up with that destruction of credit and is previewing what could happen to equities if the Fed doesn't change course. Now, starting in December 1st, quantitative tightening, i.e. the balance sheet reduction of the Fed, ends. The U.S. banking system is starting to issue more loans. And these are loans that are going to the industrials that the Trump administration wants to build things, whether that's weapons or nuclear or semiconductors or rare earths, what have you. The banks are starting to lend to those companies who are now getting government guarantees for contracts. That'll only accelerate. So I think this little bit of period of weakness in crypto is very minimal. Will keep going back up as credit expands. The quantitative tightening ends at the Fed. Trump gains control of the Fed sometime in 2026, and money is printed in some way, shape, or form. There's also the housing market. A key policy of the Trump administration is to pump housing. It's a key policy of every single administration. I don't care if it's Republican or Democrat. And so, again, I think people need to take out this partisan nature of like, oh, Trump's a Republican, he's bad because I'm a Democrat, and I oppose these things that he's going to do. Well, put in Kamala Harris as a Democrat, she would do the same stuff. And so I think once you remove all that, then you're saying, okay, well, why am I trying to fight this? If I'm not going to fundamentally get politically active and change this system that, puts this stricture on how I am as a financial person in this world, then I better just get with the program. And it's buy stocks, buy crypto, buy gold, don't use leverage, and just wait, and it'll go up.
What does it tell us about human nature or the markets in general that people just cannot bear to wait? They always panic. Like they didn't expect that it was going to go down. This whole notion of this time is different is so wild to me. So yeah, what do you take away every time people start freaking out when the price dips?
We're all human at the end of the day, and this is human nature. The market is not there to make you money if you overtrade. And this has always been the case. It's nothing changed. We're still humans. We're still these, lizard-brained mammals that live in this, new computer-age world. Like, it's only been 150 years since we really have sort of emerged from pretty much like subsistence, very basic subsistence. So I think that, human nature is human nature. And so the average human is impatient, wants the future today, is willing to gamble to get it. And unfortunately, the politicians play on that.
Yeah, that is for sure. So as you look out into the future, you know that humans are going to react that way. Do you see anything that can change the divergent economies? Because this is the thing that probably I worry the most about, is given that human nature, given how busy people are, given that some people don't have the intellectual capability to understand it, given that many have the capability but just aren't going to put the time into understanding it, they are going to be moved by policy decisions, full stop. They are not going to go, oh, well, given that there's money printing, I know assets are going to go up, so let me go get an assets. Do you worry about that? Do you not think about that at all? Like, how do you factor that into your calculus?
Well, obviously, you worry about societal breakdown, and I think we talked a lot about this sort of this AI battle that we're going to have versus should we have it? If we do have it, who should benefit from it? Or maybe we shouldn't have it at all. That's going to be the colossal defining sort of battle of this century, in the same way that communism versus capitalism, if you want to reduce sort of and imperialism, if you want to reduce the two world wars to those very, simplistic terms, was the defining moment of sort of late 19th to early 20th century humanity, right? And we're sort of living in that reaction to that, in that post World War II, World War I situation right now. This is the defining moment of what it means to be human. Are we going to blow ourselves up because we couldn't decide how to share AI? I don't know. I think that's the number one question.
I worry very much about society tearing itself apart. Oh, this is another reason. You don't live in America. So in America, man, it's really palpable. And you can feel it. Like, I even have to think about like what advertisers are going to consider me speaking to their demographic. Certainly politically, everybody's on a team. When you listen to the way that people talk, everybody speaks in team talk. If I wanted my channel to triple in views overnight, I would just pick a team and just do the team talking points. It is crazy. I know how effective that would be because people want that team perspective. Everybody wants to be in their own echo chamber. They want the heuristics of just tell me how to think. They don't want, like, I'm all about cause and effect. So I'm always trying to lay out what's the cause and effect and where does this go? And so when I look at this particular problem, which is that most people, either because they can't or they won't, they're never going to get into assets. And so that problem is not going away. And then I have the belief, the base assumption that the only problem that's impossible to solve is the political problem. The other problems maybe, but the political problem I don't think is ever going to be solved. They will give things away for free because it is how you gain and retain power. And only on the other side of tremendous pain will a culture change. This is why every empire has fallen. So that's my big concern. So from why do I make the content that I make? I'm making the content in the hopes that I can make a simple set of choices accessible to more people so that at least more people will get on the life raft. But for that, people have to face what's actually going to happen. And yeah, man, I don't know how many people are going to do it.
I think the United States is specific because that's, majority of your audience is not in the worst off shape of all countries that are highly indebted. There's no enemies, right? There's two big oceans. Canada and Mexico are essentially vassal states of the United States. The United States is energy self-sufficient at the right price, right? Oil's too cheap right now. That's why shale is struggling and some of these oil producers. There's plenty of offshore drilling to give oil and natural gas to the U.S. to have enough energy to be self-sufficient. There's plenty of food in the United States. Yes, maybe it's not the best quality and there's too much high fructose corn syrup or whatever nonsense that is in the food supply in the U.S. But again, there is enough food in the U.S. So the debt is a problem kind of, but from a holistic standpoint, I don't see this like zombie apocalypse, hyperinflationary problem for the United States anytime soon. When you think about Rome, right? It took hundreds of years for Rome to fall after the underlying economic model didn't work. They couldn't import enough slaves to do enough labor, and there weren't enough free, Italian Roman citizens to do stuff. It took hundreds of years before, Rome fell. Like the United States is not going anywhere just because the debt to GDP is 135 or 140%. Like there's, an immense capacity to add more debt in the US situation. Life might not be the most fun and, pleasurable for a lot of people, but I don't see this as this sort of like, oh my God, the US is going to blow up sort of situation, because again, there's enough food, there's enough energy at the right price, and there's no outside invader is going to come to the US and sort of like take over the country. Like, why would you want to do that? Who wants to rule the United States? Like, that'd be the dumbest thing I could ever think of.
Okay, well, then let me walk you through my thesis on what's going to happen next. So this is how I see this playing out. We're stuck in Thucydides' trap. China's on the rise. We're on the decline. No declining power ever has just gracefully accepted that they were being surpassed. England being the most recent example, only accepted defeat because they just got battered so hard during World War II and just found themselves so indebted to us. They just didn't have an option. They were so fatigued. They had suffered so much for so long, and they were so in debt. They didn't have a choice. So they go through war. So now 12 of the 16 times that a declining superpower has collided with a rising superpower, they've ended up in open kinetic warfare. So it's like statistically, the odds are not in our favor. We're already doing weird things in Venezuela, doing currency swaps with Argentina from where I'm sitting as a way to let China know, hey, motherfuckers, South America is our hemisphere. It is not yours. You will stay out of it. Be a real shame if something happened to one of your ships in the Caribbean. So obviously, China is now doing all kinds of shit off the coast of Japan to let people know where they're at with Taiwan. Japan clapped back. China clapped back, to Japan saying, all right, well, if you guys want to fucking test us, if you want to start talking that it's existential and that you're going to have to do something, if you're feeling froggy, leap. So it's like, I feel all that instability. Then factor on top of that, you've got the US right now choosing between essentially brands of socialism. So we both agree that there's going to be what I will characterize as additional stress put on the system. So if I'm China and I'm looking at America, I'm like, oh, good. You fuckwits are going to like tear yourselves apart. Fantastic. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to build a gold corridor in South America. I'm going to peg the yuan to gold. I'm going to make sure that the US loses the reserve currency status. I'm going to weaken you guys. Yeah, I don't plan to invade you, but I am going to, by the way, take over Taiwan by 2027. You're going to do fucking nothing about it. And so now you get in a situation where your biggest rival is picking off allies. Your biggest rival controls essentially your entire warfare pipeline. So they're going to be able to do effectively what they want because they can choke you off from rare earth minerals and drone parts and all kinds of stuff. And so the US is going to be just put in a weaker position. Like you, I don't imagine this isn't you wake up one day and it's catastrophic. It's the US is just put in a weaker and weaker state, is in a worse off position in terms of who they can influence globally, which means things will get worse economically. You'll be in an economic battle with China for who gets to trade where, with who, with what. And given that we're already printing money ad infinitum, that it just everything gets weaker and worse. And so that we are already doing political assassinations, we're already at each other's throat. You get the Venezuelaification or the Argentinification of the US over the next 10 to 15 years. That's what I worry about.
I mean, there's a lot there to unpack, but I think the U.S. will transition from a unipolar hegemon to a very powerful country. And I guess the question is, how does the American psyche handle that. Could be bad, could be okay. People just like, hey, fuck it, whatever. China is the number two and number one. We're number one and number two, and we deal with it, right? And as you mentioned, right, China has rare earths. The U.S. doesn't have any. That'll persist for however long it persists. But it basically means that if China's not going to sell you this stuff to, shoot the weapons, and you can't shoot the weapons, which essentially is a really good thing, because if the U.S. had enough weapons to shoot, then this whole situation would be probably a lot more scary in terms of the global sort of situation globally. But because they can't shoot enough weapons, then, Trump has to stop the war in Ukraine. As sad as the Israel-Iran situation was, it lasted 12 days because Israel started to feel what happens when you get bombed by another country because you don't have enough missiles to defend yourself, right? And so, again, this is all predicated on China's there to make money and trade. They're not there to supply the United States with carte blanche go launching missiles at people, which the U.S. would love to do, because that's just in the nature of the country. It's been at war for pretty much 95% of its existence. So, again, I take a little bit more of a glass half full sort of attitude towards, the declining, empire of the United States, where there are limits. There are other countries that can enforce these limits on the United States. And there are internal problems that'll be dealt with, however they're dealt with. But hopefully we don't have a thermonuclear war where everyone's shooting hypersonic missiles at each other. And, if we take that off the table, then, if you don't like the way the situation is in the United States, there's a whole big old world out there. Leave.
Yeah, that's easy for somebody like me. That isn't easy for the vast majority of people. That's the thing that I worry about. Okay. That's enough doomerism, black pill. Yeah. So now talk to me about 2030. What does 2030 look like? This is only, 4 years really away from the time that we're recording this. What does that look like? What do we have to look forward to?
I think that we have some sort of like massive market crash between now and then. And
hey, the end of doom and gloom. Tell me about the market crash.
It's more predicated on, again, AI adoption is going to happen faster than we think and impact the structure of the economy in a way that people aren't really appreciating right now. But
in the ways that we already talked about, or something that we haven't touched on yet?
No, the ways that we already talked about. I don't think that's the common knowledge. The common knowledge is, Facebook is going to be a $15 trillion company because they've created the best AI possible, or, Tencent or whatever company, right? It's not, oh shit, what happens when all the bankers don't have jobs anymore? How does that change the society? But I think we get to 2030, we have a larger installed robot base. Cost of labor goes down. We have essentially a very intelligent prediction engine called an LLM. Maybe we have AGI or whatever that means or not. I don't think it really matters. But we do knowledge work cheaper and more efficiently. And we take human intelligence, and instead of sending the smartest and brightest people, like myself, to study bullshit finance versus being an engineer or being a dancer or being a poet or whatever, we have more people doing creative things, whatever that means, creating sort of joy for other people because there is no other option. You can't be a banker anymore because that's not a profitable sort of profession. But you can be a writer, you can be a philosopher, you can be a sports, somebody who does sports, whatever it is, right? And I think there is a better scenario where labor is cheap. We have a global conversation about what it means to be a productive human. We haven't killed each other as we've moved to this sort of much less scarce society. It's definitely not post-scarcity by any ways, but we have much less scarcity. And so we have much more creativity, intelligence, doing things to just make the human condition better. So I want to believe in that. And I'll be, positioned in my portfolio for, yes, aggressive money printing. Maybe there's a backlash to that because the inflation gets too unbearable in a lot of countries. And so you have to have political rhetoric that sort of at least tries to pretend that there's austerity. And then we have sort of this AI, not miracle, but labor is cheaper, knowledge work is cheaper, and we have a better human existence in terms of more things to enjoy of just being ourselves and, communing with each other.
All right. So let's talk about the road to get there. So 2026 is here. Stablecoins, I think, is going to play a big role. I know the Trump administration is trying to do some interesting things with stablecoins. Do stablecoins become the new bank? Does that start happening in 26? Like, walk me through what you see in that near-term window.
So I think for stablecoins is a way, the reason why the Trump administration supports stablecoins is they see it as a way to shove treasury debt down the throats of the global population at very attractive rates. And so I think that in 2026, you're going to start seeing big tech platforms and the large banks have their own stablecoin or be distribution platforms for things like Tether and Athena and Circle, USDC to get these stablecoins out there. So you will be more familiar with sending each other a stablecoin than you are with going onto your online banking system and sending somebody a bank wire. I think that's going to accelerate very, very quickly, especially for Gen Z and millennials who already are comfortable with online banking. And that's going to lead to a proliferation of stable coins, and people are going to be using DeFi. They're going to be comfortable with these solutions. And then there will be a lot of banks that no longer are relevant. There'll be some like JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs who are agile enough to survive, but your average bank, I go online, I use a lot of banks. Most of their technology is trash, right? And now you're going to say, oh, I can literally like move my money from my bank to this app where it does everything. I got an AI assistant to help me. I don't have to deal with humans that work 9 to 5, only 5 days a week, and who are very, annoying to deal with. I've got this awesome thing called a smartphone and an AI assistant. I'm going to use that. And the stable coin, I can send money 24/7, 365. Great. I'm using that. I'm not going to use my pick your, small little bank that is pretty shit. So they're going to face existential, demise. The large banks will still exist. They'll offer their own solution to that. But I think we're going to be very comfortable with using stable coins, and then very comfortable with using DeFi, whether that's a lending platform, that's trading. And, some of these protocols, like Athena, like Pendle, like EtherFi, obviously I'm all invested in these things, and this is why we'll do well in this scenario. But again, we're just going to move to this post-banking world, and the banks either adapt or they die. Either you adapt to this digital first native way or you die. Yes, there'll be some banks for the boomers who still want to walk down this future branch like my mother. There'll be that. Cool, whatever. But the fun stuff's happening over here. And the money keeps getting printed and crypto keeps going up. And we sort of crescendo in sort of the 2027, 2028 timeframe where you're going to have at least a pushback on, hey, there's an affordability crisis, and maybe there will be some negative rhetoric to money printing towards austerity, and they might gain some support, which will spook investors. And like, oh shit, is XYZ countries, United States, is China, is Europe, is Japan, are they really serious about stopping the money printing and allowing the credit to contract and putting out of business all these over leveraged, businesses and financial intermediaries? Maybe I should take some chips off the table, right? Maybe, NVIDIA at 20 trillion market cap, with all this accounting nonsense that they're doing with these deals, maybe I'm done with that. I'm going to exit stage left. And that's when I think we get like a massive collapse in all these over levered markets. And by that time, maybe the AI sort of effectiveness and usefulness will start to catch up with the hype. If you think about 2001, when all these massive fiber optics companies like Cisco and all of them crashed, that they built out this amazing substrate that created social media in the next decade. It'll be much faster with AI. So there'll be a massive crash in all of these hyperscalers and, model builders like OpenAI and Anthropic. And then in the wake of it, we'll get whatever useful application that entrepreneurs create to essentially make labor super cheap and make knowledge super cheap. And what are we going to be able to do with that as a human society?
The pressure that you see that's going to make that happen in 27, 28 is inflation due to money printing, giving us that K-shaped tale of two economies. People get pissed off enough that they begin speaking up. The speak up then makes the politicians go, maybe we need to start signaling that we're going to tighten. And just the hint of that signal is potentially going to spook the market, and that causes the drop.
Yeah, think about 2021, right? We had, at least in the United States, you had 10% inflation or whatever it was. Again, that's not Zimbabwe or Argentina or Weimar Republic. It's obviously just high inflation. And just the act of the Federal Reserve in December saying, hey, we're going to start a tightening program in 3 months' time was the thing that popped all the bubbles: crypto, stocks, housing, whatever, right? And so that's when we got the bond market. worst performing bond market since 1812 in the United States from 2022 to 2025, 3 or 5, 3-year rolling average, right? So it doesn't take much when you're a highly levered economy. And the levers are like even more insane because people are going to print that much more money because they believe that that's the way to win elections. And so when somebody stands up and says, hey, maybe we should try something different, just the threat of it actually happening, just factoring in that probability, even if it might never happen, is what takes investors to say, guess what? I'm going to exit stage left, and maybe I'm just going to sit in cash for now.
Give me the scale of what you see happening. Is this 2008? Is this 80s minor downturn? Is this 1929? Like, what scale are we talking about?
I think we're talking 1929, 2008.
Whoa.
Because the AI CapEx build out is as big as, or maybe I should say 1907, the railroads, when the railroads, so 1907, 1903, whenever the crash due to the robber barons and the railroad trust in the United States, the build out of AI CapEx is as big or bigger than the build out of the railroad infrastructure in the 19th century, which was one of the largest, if you look at percent of GDP, CapEx build outs in modern human history. That is what we're doing right now with AI hyperscalers, whether that's in the United States or in China. And guess what? Railroad business is a shitty fucking business to be in as a long-term investor. And sooner or later, investors will realize, oh shit, I'm investing in the new age railroad. I don't want to be the new age railroad. Google's not the new age railroad. They are now, but Google wasn't the new age railroad in 2001. They were the thing that used the cheap fiber optic connectivity to build their service. Same with Facebook, same with Amazon, right? They did well after the CapEx boom. So investors will realize that situation, be like, oh shit, I'm investing in new age railroads. I don't want to be in that. Let me get out of that.
So this is interesting. I've not heard this before. So basically, there are business types that are so capital expensive, but people get hyped about them. So they invest in them, but they're not going to make their money back ever, maybe, or certainly not for a long time. And so bad risk adjusted return. They finally realize that, they get out, and then we realize, like we had a whole lot of capital tied up in something. They got spooked. They pulled out, presumably at a loss. And now we're basically sucking liquidity out of the system. Is that how that would play out?
Yeah, I mean, if AI is a thing that powers the American and Chinese forward economy, and literally all we're doing is building out essentially a railroad for other awesome entrepreneurs to build something on top of, well, again, the railroads are not great businesses long term. They're a natural monopoly, if you want to call it that.
But what I'm trying to figure out is, okay, fair enough, but England would go into a country, the first thing they would do is build a railroad so they could extract all of the resources, and England becomes a gigantic empire on the back of railroads. So I get why it might not be a good investment for a small number of people that put a ton of money in, but overall, it's so transformative. I'm trying to figure out why you think this brings a full-blown crash like 1903, 1907, whatever the year was.
I think you mentioned it, because the return on capital is not there. When you invest alongside the government, at first it feels great. Oh, great, I got the government behind me. They're just going to pump my bags, right? So people feel great that the United States government is now getting into industrial policy, that they're pumping nuclear, they're pumping AI, they're pumping semiconductors. Well, guess what? Go back and become a Chinese investor and look at the average return over the last 20 years. Who did really, really well? Yes, China built all this amazing infrastructure that helped the average person upgrade their standard of living. But as an investor on a long-term basis, you made no money in China, right? You invested alongside the government. You provided your capital. Chinese government said, great, thank you for that capital. I'm going to build airports, roads, apartments, whatever. On a macro basis, you made no money as an equity investor in China. Now, they're great for society, bad for investors. We're going to repeat the same thing with AI in the United States, especially. AI is great for society, hopefully, bad for individual investors who hold these investments too long. Because yes, it feels great investing with the government right now, but maybe by 2028, not so great when Nvidia was up 10x, but now you're down 90% because you didn't get out in time. So I think that's the lesson. And as you said, right, these are great investments for the collective, but it's bad for the shareholder. Right now, Trump and whoever else comes after him are going to be like, yes, we're going to support the shareholder. We're here to make sure that the private investor makes money. But guess what? Trump's a politician. What if you invest with Trump on some semiconductor fab and you want to reduce headcount by 50% because that's more efficient? But Trump says, that's a district that's at risk for this so-and-so Republican. No, you're not firing those workers. I don't care if your return on equity declines. I have an election to win. These people have put me in power to make sure that they have a job. I'm going to make sure they have a job. And so that's the risk when you invest alongside the government. The government has different goals than you do as an investor. And that's where essentially the AI is transforming into with all these massive deals that the US government is now supporting, whether it's semiconductors, it's nuclear, it's data centers, it's permitting for the building out of electric capacity with natural gas and utilities, whatever, right? You're investing alongside the government. It feels really good right now. It's good for the stocks right now. But if you hold it too long, you're going to be, best case at flat, more likely you're going to crash out. And you can look at China and you can look at this and see it happen over the last 20 years where, the needs of the state came over the needs of private investors. It always happens this way.
That's interesting. That one was not on my radar. I will definitely have to spend some more time with that. Talk to me about how you approach AI investing. Obviously, right now, the stock market is effectively AI, period, full stop, end of story. There's nothing else. And now you're saying that a huge part of what people are hyped about is going to get them in trouble. How do you approach AI?
I don't invest in it. I'll wait for what comes after this build out of the hyperscalers. After they spent the hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars building these data centers, creating this amazing intelligence. Okay, what can we do with this intelligence after the fact? Again, I don't want to be in the railroad business. I'm not smart enough to know when to get off the train. So let me just not play the game. I don't know NVIDIA. I don't know Google. I don't know the NASDAQ. I know crypto. I know they're going to have to print money to sort of ameliorate the social pressures and the social dislocations created by knowledge work going to essentially zero in terms of price for intelligence. I know we got to print more money, so I'll just stay in crypto. Am I going to have the best return if I pick Palantir or NVIDIA or whatever stock over the last 2 years? No, but I don't know when to get off the train. I'm not that good. I'm just not going to play the game. I'll wait till, I want to buy Amazon in 2003 and 2004, not in 1999.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense. Now, the conventional wisdom would be that it's not timing the market, it's time in the market. So while I get you don't want to buy March of 1999 at the absolute peak, you actually are in some ways trying to time the market in terms of waiting. Is it because you think the signs will be so clear on the other side, and or you don't mind missing an opportunity in an industry that you don't really understand?
Well, let's say that let's say that the AI thing continues and NVIDIA goes from a 5 trillion market cap to a 20 trillion market cap, right? Because they just rock stars. Jensen's the man, signing titties all over the place with his leather jacket, right? $20 trillion NVIDIA. So you have 4 extra money if you put your money in now. But then NVIDIA goes from a 20 trillion company to, let's call it, let's go back down to like 5, right? So it goes down, what is that, 80%? Or whatever the math is, that's shaky on that right now.
Sure.
And then let's say that, there's a period of lull and then NVIDIA goes back from 5 to 10. Right. So I invested at 5, it went to 20, it went back down to 5 or even lower. And I've basically done nothing over the last 2 years. And NVIDIA is still a great company. Or I waited for the first real shakeout. And then I went back into the really good companies that are still around. And I bought their stock after the crash. Even if they don't get back to the market cap that they were when I first invested, I still make more money than I would have in the first scenario on a risk-adjusted basis, or just probabilistically, right? So you always want to invest from 2 to 10 gets you a 5x return, but from like 10 to 20 is only 2x return. But I'm taking more risk because it's intrinsically believe that it's overvalued, but I feel like I have no other choice. I have to invest in AI. Well, just wait. You can make more money in a shorter period of time once things have actually crashed out on the rebound than you can investing in something when you intrinsically believe you're buying at the top. And so that's how I feel about AI. And you can look at sort of the internet stocks that survived the crash, like Amazon, right? Amazon went down something like 95% from 2000 to whatever the low it was in like 2001 or 2002. And then it's up, I don't know, whatever, like 30, 40, 50x, whatever it is from then until today. Yes, if you kept your money in from 1999 until the present, you've made money, but it took you 30 fucking years. Right. So that's just how I look at things.
Okay, so the investing that you do, is it entirely just, I'm in crypto because I understand it, I pay super close attention, or do you have a diversified strategy that you use? How do you approach this moment if you think that the most popular asset on planet Earth is overvalued?
So my view is I believe in money printing. I think everyone does, whether you are Warren Buffett or you're crypto degen in the basement. You believe that whenever there's a problem, there's going to be money printing. Okay, so if I believe in money printing, and I don't want to pick stocks. I want to invest in a broad-based either equity index or something that has a broad appeal, like gold or crypto or a house or whatever, right? I'm not a stock picker. Yes, stock pickers can outperform the strategy that I'm talking about, but I'm not a stock picker. I just want to invest in the fastest horse. What has been the fastest horse from 2008 to the present, which has probably been one of the largest periods of money printing, whether it's US, China, Japan, Europe, in human history, it's been Bitcoin. Historically, hands down. So if I want to bet on the fastest horse, an asset that's in fixed supply that cannot be debased by the government, that is digitally native. So you could imagine an AI using Bitcoin, or people, because now they're more comfortable using their phone or the internet to transact value, they'll prefer Bitcoin over, say, gold, for example. Then I just want to own the fastest horse in this race, in this debasement race. It's Bitcoin. So just buy Bitcoin. That's it. That's all I got to do. My whole job at Maelstrom, and I tell my employees this, is we do investments to make a return. I pay you a bonus, I take my return, and I buy more Bitcoin. That's all I do. All I care about is stacking more Bitcoin, because I believe that in this debasement scenario, as long as I can have my pulse on the money printing, the banking system, and this is why I read very boring reports about, bank call reports and bank balance sheets, and I understand, how the central banks print money in all the different major jurisdictions. That's what I study, because I believe if I get that right, then all I need to choose is the right horse. And the right horse, historically speaking, is Bitcoin. Obviously, history doesn't portend to the future. It does advise the future. I believe that Bitcoin is going to continue to be the best performing broad asset. Again, it's not like you pick Palantir and it went up 20x over the last 2 years. Great. If you can do that, you're amazing. I'm not. I'm going to choose Bitcoin, and it's going to go up the most, whether it's gold or stocks or houses or bonds. They're all going to go up, but Bitcoin is going to go up the most. And that's how I approach investing. And so that's why I mostly focus on liquidity. What is the expectation of liquidity? How does reality conform to that expectation? And that's what informs you when you see me on, when I write an essay or I'm on X and I post, I think Bitcoin is going down to this level, or I think Bitcoin is going up to this level. It has nothing to do with me reading the chart of Bitcoin, and everything for me to read, I think the market's misinterpreting what's happening with the US banking system, or with how China is printing money, or the fiscal situation in Japan, or how is Europe going to fund this war they want to fight with Russia with defense spending. Again, these are all the things I care about, because if I get that right, then I just have to pick the right asset. And I believe the asset is Bitcoin.
So given all that, do you think Michael Saylor's strategy is perfect, or is there something that you would do differently?
Because he has access to the corporate debt markets, I think the initial strategy is perfect. He's able to issue an asset, borrow dollars that are going to be in infinite supply, and buy something that's going to be in finite supply. So I think as a fundamental level, it is a great strategy. Now, the nuance is, how is he able to do that in a price per share accretive way for the MicroStrategy stock? Obviously, it was easier to do back when rates were lower, a little harder to do now. I'm not really sure how, if you have a dollar of capital today, if MicroStrategy is the best way to play that, or to buy Bitcoin. I don't really play in the stock market very much. I'll just stick with, straight Bitcoin.
The thing that I've always found fascinating about what he's done, besides the just absolute gigantic brass testicles, is because I just could not do a single strategy like that, is that he basically pulled all of the fancy gambling options that the stock market has on top of Bitcoin, so that people can do all the fancy derivative tradings and all that, but with Bitcoin as the underlying asset. Is there any potential risk there, given that on a long enough timeline, Bitcoin's already going down in volatility. His strategy requires volatility. Does he hit some sort of problem, or is it just that people will slowly stop investing if what they want is volatility? What does that look like?
So he'll have a choice at some point. At some point, he'll have to take a lot more risk in the type of debt and structures that he issues, whether that's coupons or it's the date at which he needs to repay things. And he either make a choice. Either it's I'm going to take this, add more leverage to my capital structure, and then I have to really hope Bitcoin keeps going up, or it's okay, I'm going to stop playing this game, and MicroStrategy just becomes, my 1x Bitcoin. It doesn't go up or down faster than Bitcoin. It just is Bitcoin. And if all you can buy is a listed stock, that's what you get. I don't think we're there yet. But at some point, if he gets big enough, he'll get to that decision. And then that's a corporate decision of what they want to do.
It's interesting. What did you think when Michael Burry folded his hedge fund and said, I don't understand how people are pricing this market. I'm out, returning the money back to shareholders or investors?
I mean, shorting is hard. I don't do it. It's a mindset. It's a skill. And if, maybe he mentally just wasn't there to suffer the knocks, right? If he fundamentally believes AI is a bubble, I 100% agree. Would I ever short NVIDIA? Never. But Michael Burry will do it. He's got the mentality for that. I don't have the mentality for that. And so maybe he was like, fuck it. I've already made so much money. I've got my own family office to manage. I'll pursue these strategies and I won't have to care what my LPs think about why these returns are lackluster until I get to that situation when NVIDIA goes down 95%, right?
Interesting. Okay, the thing that keeps me awake at night is China. I know you've spent a fair amount of time looking at China. What is their economy actually like right now? I hear rumors that I want to believe, and so I absolutely hit the pause button because I know it's what I want to hear. I hear that Xi is losing power. I hear that their economy, because of the housing bubble, is just in terrible shape. What's really going on, at least as far as you can see from the outside?
So I haven't been to China mainland since 2019. I've been to Hong Kong a few times. Obviously, I live in Singapore with a large Chinese diaspora, so you can hear what goes on shore. And I think that at some point, maybe I'll write an essay about this. I think that China is a potential future for a post-AI world. Let me explain that. So China has been one of the most aggressive in installing robots, right? They have the most installed robot capacity in an industrial sense of any country per capita in the world. They've been the most aggressive in terms of AI, right? There is no sort of like individual data. The data all belongs to the state. The state says, I want to use this data and to create these AI services, whether that's ride hailing, it's ordering your food, it's using your palm to pay for things on WeChat and whatnot, right? You go to China right now, it might feel like in the tier 1 cities, I'm not talking about the countryside, I'm talking Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, the 4 tier 1 cities in China. They are the future, right? Everything is seamless. Everything is clean. Stuff is fucking cheap. The quality is good. And this is the future. But youth unemployment might be 40%. You have Tianpian. You graduate from university, you go to a top, it's very difficult to get into university in China. You have to be and if you do get into university, you graduate, probably 30 to 40% of you will not have a job. And so you're literally living at home, you're doing odd jobs. They call it the lying flat movement. You have some like micro apartment in Beijing or Shenzhen or wherever it is, but you live. There's great entertainment. Have got WeChat. Everything's on.
Are you getting UBI?
Kind of. It's your parents. It's the savings of one child policy. You have essentially you 2 parents, you have grandparents, and so you have all these people contributing to you as this little emperor, right? So you're just living off of your extended family, and it works for now. Now she has a problem. Well, maybe he'll have a problem. Maybe he won't. I don't know, of dissatisfaction because he doesn't care about employment. He believes that AI is the future. Now, when they get to that future, what will this Chinese state's policy be about taking care of the population? Will they increase the amount of social services that they provide? you'd be very surprised to know that, the amount of social safety net in China is less than Europe and the United States, which is why the savings rate is so high in China. But she believes that the future is this AI manufacturing techno country with basically a homogenous Han Chinese population. And that's what he is creating. And right now it looks like it's succeeding. This might be the future where, again, most people don't have most people go to university, don't have the job that they went to university for, but everything else is so cheap. Their services are so good. Doesn't really matter. They get by. Can you have a socially cohesive society when that happens? Obviously in China, because you have a much more ethnically homogenous situation, a culturally homogenous situation, and scar tissue from, the 50s, 60s, 70s during the Mao era, and then previous with the warring states and, the century of humiliation, right? Chinese people love the stability that Xi Jinping provides society. So all this talk about he's super unpopular is kind of off the mark because you haven't read Chinese history to understand that people like the stability and the control that is, right now in China. And so again, but I also think people think, oh, they want to go to war. Well, what parent wants your only child to be going to the military? This is what, Chinese woman, it was a very good analyst, said, like, she does not have the juice with the average sort of parent who's going to want their only child. I'm going to ship them off to the PLA to go to war against who, for what reason? When, from all, ways to look at things, there's abundance of food, there's abundance of energy, and there's abundance of services provided to the people. What do you need to go to war for? So I think this whole sort of Western fear over this like Chinese army going into Taiwan or like going into all these other countries is sort of misplaced because they don't understand Chinese history and the demographic situation that they're in. They haven't been there to see these gleaming cities of sort of what AI and robotics can do. And sort of mobile apps and ubiquitous data sharing between the government and big tech, right? That is what China is. I think that the West is going to move more towards that situation than they might want to admit to themselves at this point. But that's sort of how I see the Chinese situation right now.
Okay. Very clear picture. Now on the economy easy enough to bounce back from. They have a lot more room to print money than we do. What's that feel like?
Well, I mean, Xi Jinping said houses are for living and not for speculation. I forgot it was 2018 or whatever it is. And the other message is common prosperity. He doesn't care that people lost money in housing speculation. And as long as people are not rising up in the streets, I think he'll continue to pursue this policy. The Chinese government has not stimulated as much as the West has to abate this property crisis. He is stimulating to build more AI to overcome the semiconductor embargo that the United States placed on them, to make sure that their BYD electric cars, $2,000 or whatever it is, that they sell those to the emerging world, right? You go to China, everything that you get in America is better and cheaper in China. And so it just is a fact. So that's what they've been focusing. That's where their credit has gone. Whereas the U.S. credit went to go blow up Muslims in the Middle East, China took their credit and we're going to build AI.
I hate everything about that last few sentences there, Arthur. That was fantastic. Horrible, but absolutely fantastic. Okay, that's China in a nutshell. Give me Japan. Watching what they're doing, knowing that they have a birth rate crisis, knowing that they're eschewing immigration, knowing that the yen carry trade is unwinding. What do you see there? Are they in trouble? Are they going to have some sort of contagion effect on the rest of the global markets?
I mean, Japan, again, is a very wealthy country. They've $3 or $4 trillion of net portfolio assets. And so eventually what will happen is the yen will strengthen. The Japanese government will tell the Japanese people and companies, bring your yen home, invest it here in Japan, stop funding the United States and Europe and their build out of AI, bring this money home. Let's build back Japan. I think the yen goes below 100 and you have robots, right? Yes, Japan does not like immigration, but they've got robots. And so the robots will be there. The population will fall, but they've made a cultural choice where they don't care. They're not going to open up the spigot of immigration to essentially fix that problem with humans. They'll fix it with robots. And again, another culturally and ethically homogenous country, and so that they'll band together and they'll survive. I spent a lot of time in Japan. I love Japan. I don't see there's going to be, any real issue. There'll be a lot of inflation to get there, but again, culturally and ethically homogenous society that is banding together to do what the government tells them to do, for right or for wrong. And so again, I don't see a problem because as a country, they're very wealthy. And so as they sell their US and European assets to bring that home, they will rebuild Japan to be, again, a robot first society. That'll spell trouble for the United States and Europe, who now need to fund all that capital leaving. That just promotes more and more money printing, the same thing that we've been talking about over the last few hours.
Interesting. The yen carry trade gets a lot of breathless coverage on X for sure, that it's going to have some sort of big knock-on effect. It doesn't sound like you share that concern.
Well, it will. I guess as we had in August of 2024, whatever it was. When that sort of kind of blew up, what happens? The Fed, the ECB, they all have to print money to make sure that the capital that's leaving, because that carry trade unwinds, doesn't destroy their bond and equity markets. And so we know what happens when there is financial disturbance. The Western authorities print money. When the Japanese Inc. removes their money to repatriate it to Japan to build back better in Japan, the West will print money to plug the hole. So there might be a bit of sort of market dysfunction for a while, but it won't take much. The authorities will say, okay, cool, we're just going to print the money. Yeah, Japanese investors, we get it. You got to leave. Yen's got to appreciate. All that's cool. And the Fed's just going to print the money.
Printing is the eternal answer. It is, that is so true and so depressing that is just the solve for everything. Okay. Very interesting. Now you've talked about France, just to hit my another country that I'm very curious to see how this is all going to play out. You've talked about France backing out of the euro, that you think that would be a good idea. Why?
And the euro is a terrible thing. It should never have been created, but it was. It's
because it centralizes power and stops competition between the different currencies, or something else?
There's 27 members of the euro. Are you saying that there is one monetary policy that's right for 27 different nations, 27 different cultures, 27 different desires?
We have one monetary policy for 50 states.
And it used to be 12, right? There used to be 12 district Federal Reserve banks that had different discount rates in every district, right? Again, I think that decentralization is better than centralization. The euro is a centralized, monster. But again, it's fatally flawed, and France is horribly in debt and very unproductive with that debt. They just spend it at the government level. That's coming home to roost because the United States and Japan will no longer fund them, and Germany for that matter. So Germany and Japan are the largest funders of governments and assets globally. They have combined something like 8 or 9 trillion of net portfolio assets. A lot of that went to Japan. And essentially, they made that money off the back of the United States. The United States said, hey, you host our military to contain communism, aka Russia and China. We will let you export to our market, and we'll let you restrict our companies from going into your markets. And that essentially gave them an $8 trillion wealth bucket, which they then bought U.S. stocks, U.S. bonds. And in the European example, Germany funded France. And so as that unwinds, as everybody tries to go their own way because the population is like, hold on a minute, we created all this wealth and I'm still fucking broke. Fuck this. Print the money. Give me healthcare. Give me whatever it is that I want. Stop investing abroad. That money leaves France. France is like, oh shit, we have to fund this government. We don't have any real wealth to fund it with. Nobody's funding governments anymore. Everybody's funding themselves. Well, this euro thing, Christine Lagarde and the ECB says we can't print enough money to do things domestically. Fuck you, Christine Lagarde. I'm going to print money and focus on France first. And that breaks the euro. As soon as France says, I'm going to change banking laws, restrict capital from movement across Europe, or not do what the ECB tells me to do, whether that's for greater than 3% of GDP budget deficits, then the euro in all effect is over and capital is not flowing freely around the Eurozone. And that's what ends the euro. And so, France is slowly walking towards that situation. And you can take a look at the liabilities of the French banking system within the EU system called the Target 2 imbalance. It's deteriorated rapidly since 2021. And eventually, whatever that is, this will come to a head, and the ECB will be faced with a choice to print money to save the euro, and they'll print the money, and again, it doesn't really matter if assets go up, money gets printed, the euro is either there or it's not there, but capital controls are introduced. So if you're in France or if you're in Europe, get out while the getting out is good. Get your money out of Europe, put it somewhere else.
All right, man, there is a lot of money printing going on, a lot of uncertainty in the world. Through it all, you have stayed very sanguine. Tell people, what is the one thing that you have as a core belief that most people do not, that allows you to be very even keel through what is certainly in our lifetimes completely unprecedented instability?
I read books. And when you read books, you find out that everything that we're experiencing today, yes, of course, there's an AI, money printing, debt jubilee, social discontent, empires in the rise, empires on the fall. We've done this all before. We've done it in Rome. We've done it in Weimar Republic. We've done it in World War II. We've done it in, pick your ancient civilization. They've all had the same problems. They've all had the same, menu of solutions. And every time the politicians chose to print the money. And every time math and the compound rate of interest and time worked against them. And every time, if you own gold or certain other assets, you did well. It's something that you could keep them from being confiscated from the state. So as long as you do that and you don't use leverage, you'll be okay. Because again, time, math, and human nature are on your side.
Awesome. Brother, I am grateful for every chance that we get to spend time together. Thank you so much for taking the time. Where can people connect with you online?
So on X, @CryptoHaze, on Substack, @CryptoHaze as well. I write my bi-monthly newsletter. And yeah, you'll hear me on programs like yourselves and others across the interweb.
Awesome. I love it. All right, everybody, if you have not already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace. If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more. In the 1980s, under Reagan's leadership, the US economy exploded with 12% real GDP growth in just 18 months. And the man behind that boom, today's guest, economist Arthur Laffer. Now, with America sitting on $38 trillion